who's responsible for human rights? Is it God or is it government? I mean, if it was God, then God doesn't believe in pink unicorns. So, there's one right behind me. There's a pink unicorn right here. I know God doesn't believe in pink unicorns, but does government. We're going to dive right into this in just a few moments. So stay tuned and grab your beverage and grab your popcorn. This is going to be a wild ride, folks. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. Today, we're going to be talking about human rights. Is it government or is it God? God, government, government, God. I mean, pink unicorns, they don't exist under a God. God never created pink unicorns, but government did. So we're going to be talking about that today on the show. Today, I have Jeff Leggat joining me from Disability Action of Canada joining me. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Brent.
And I have Tom Pogson joining me from Basic Income BC. Tom is known for his basic income advocacy. And hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. Welcome, both of you. So today we're going to be talking about, like I mentioned, about human rights. Is it God's responsibility or is it government's responsibility? I mean, what is human rights? What does it stem from? I mentioned pink unicorns. They don't exist under God, but under government, they do. So today we're going to dive into a lot of that and many other topics related to our discussion today.
Yeah,
Over to Neil.
Yeah, and I just wanted to there's so many different ways we could start the show, right? And I kind of wanted to start as basic as we could, really. Really the idea of the show came about for me because we had Cheryl Hardcastle on the podcast recently, and one of her comments was that housing is a human right. And we've had other people on the show saying the same thing. Housing is a human right, and we know that the CRPD, so the Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities, they talk about housing being a human right, and that's basically a world government organization, if you want to call it that, right? A collection of world governments saying that housing is a human right. But then you have to kind of think, well, who has the power for human rights? And before we get into human rights, you have to kind of pull back a little bit, and you have to kind of think, well, okay, what makes us human? Just to start with, who or what guides us, right? One of the questions a lot of people will say, especially if they don't, so somebody might say, oh, I don't believe in God. I don't want to acknowledge God, and that's fine. But they'll say, well, I'm a good person. I don't need God, right? That's what some people will say. I don't need God. I'm just a good person. But the question becomes, what makes you good? But by what standard? By what standard are you measuring goodness? Like, does goodness come from your parents? Does goodness come from a teacher? Does goodness come from government? what is the standard for goodness, right? And then when you start to look at it that way, you're like, wow. Because like another example I can give, let's say you're in your car, Jeff, and the speed limit is 50 kilometers an hour. So what's stopping you from going 120 kilometers an hour? What's stopping you?
What's stopping me is well, it's a few things. Is safety for my own self. So that's the ego side of things. There's also adhering to the law. That's the control side that I've been conditioned to live within guidelines. And also, I don't want to hurt someone. So that's the more heart-based origin of that.
Right.
So I love the fact that you brought up people that choose not to be aligned with God or are publicly aligned with God, because there's a huge difference, I believe, in publicly being aligned with the God that we've been told about, and the God that you feel in your heart and in the very essence of who you are. So those are two different things. I, as a person who is religious, is spiritual, I don't believe in any single religion.
Right.
So you know what I mean? I'll go to Catholic church. I'll go to mass. I will go to a synagogue. I will go to a mosque. I will go to a Buddhist temple, and I will enjoy what you have to offer. And I won't align myself with any single man-interpreted idea of God, because it's tainted, because it's man-interpreted. At the same time, when it all comes down to it, if the Presbyterian church or if whatever is walking the walk and talking about helping other people, that's the essence of why I believe is our higher power, our purpose here on earth is to help each other and to celebrate each other and to support each other, because it can be a difficult life if we all become ego-driven, greed-driven, pride-driven, and forget about anybody else and buy into the fear of that person doesn't look like me, so he must be my enemy, or that person doesn't talk like me or worship like me, so that person must be evil, or your God's better than my God. It's just the most ridiculous thing. What you believe in your heart, we're all born, I believe, innately good, innately beautiful and simple. You don't have babies running away from one another because they're a different color or different anything. They just, you know what I mean? It's just,
well, and that's the thing though, Jeff. Like what makes us good? Like if you go back to my example of speeding in your car. Like you could say, well, it's because I don't want to be caught by the police, or I want to obey the speed limits that are posted by the provincial governments. You can say both of those things, but you can also say that you know what, you can say that goodness has been written in our hearts. Goodness has been written in our hearts from day one. From day one, good. We know what goodness is because it's been put there. It's been planted there already. So we already know what goodness is. And I just want to start. I just want to kind of start there.
Can I also go back there, Neil, for 1 second?
Yeah.
Just because a speed limit is posted by some person, it doesn't make it the most proper too. I mean, I'll travel on some roads that are 70 and there's no kilometers an hour. There's no possible reason to be going 70 if we're all capable drivers. 90 is comfortable, and we're all driving 90, and we're all just saying this is the most comfortable. So I mean, there's certain things you can still be a good person and challenge.
Exactly.
In our society, because there's so much ridiculous control in our society based on wrong things.
But I also wanted to go back to the pink unicorn idea, though, Brent. And I promise I won't monopolize this discussion. But I wanted to go quickly back to the pink unicorn idea because, another thing we have to think about when we talk about God versus government is who do we want to be accountable to? Like if you're accountable to, if government just thinks that they can only be accountable to themselves, if they are only saying, well, as a human being, I'm only accountable to myself to come up with the rules. Like we as government are going to set the rules, so we're only accountable to ourselves. Then that means that's why pink unicorns can exist, because things like truth and righteousness and justice, they can have different standards. Like the government can just nerf stuff. They can just nerf stuff and say, well, our idea of truth and our idea of justice and our idea of righteousness is this. And it could be like wildly different, and that's why you have, like I said, we have pink unicorns, because they can nerf things down and say, well, here's my idea of truth, and maybe that idea of truth isn't truth at all. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
like there's different ideologies that can also come in. With I talk about neoliberalism a lot. I wasn't expecting to start there, but it had a profound effect on the way that governments, originally it was a kind of a right-wing thing with Reagan and Thatcher and so forth. But when the Berlin Wall fell in 1991, then it became this idea of, there's only pure free market capitalism works. And so everything was focused on that, and everything was focused on employment. And so they looked at disability and went, okay, so, and then they went in that direction of, you see it in a lot of the things. Like, actually, I was wrong about something, because I was talking to Brent before about the United Nations Convention on Human Rights, on rights of persons with disabilities, and they talk about the inclusion thing, and there's a lot of that you see running around where it's like, it's all about inclusion. It's about inclusion, which of course means inclusion to labor. But in that Convention of Human Rights, there is Article 28 2C, adequate standard of living and social protection. So it was still put in there. But it depends on what governments see as what they're supposed to do and what's important to them. Like that's why I was complaining before about how the Liberals MP was disability inclusion. He couldn't just be disability. It had to be
right.
It had to be focused on making them into employees, of course.
Right.
And but I had this crazy idea. I was going to start in kind of a story that I like to tell when it comes to the subject of rights and the history of rights. I mean, the history of rights, like the first person to talk about rights at all was the Babylonian Sirius Cylinder in 593 BC against forced religion and slavery, allowing people to return home. So like the idea of rights have been this thing that have been evolving for years, like centuries. And like I like to tell this little story, which kind of connects with basic income and the commons and things. But who remembers Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves? Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Robin and Morgan Freeman land in London, and they go clubbing. Land in England, and then they get to Robin's land, and there's that little boy named Wolf who's running from essentially the cops. And why is he running from the cops? Well, he's running from the cops because he killed a deer. So what? The deer was on the king's land, and if you kill a deer on the king's land, you're screwed. Well, if that boy had shot that deer after King John had died and Henry III was in power, that boy would have been safe. The cops would have been in the wrong for chasing him, because what happened was Magna Carta came in and the Charter of the Forest came in, and that thing protected people's, like, it disafforested land, making the land a commons again. So people could have a free lunch, but they could hunt, farm, fish, do falconry, gather truffles, whatever they wanted to do, and it was perfectly safe. And like Hannah Arendt's line from The Human Condition, everyone has the right to have rights. And so there's been like these generations of rights, starting with civic and political rights, speech, expression, religion, moving from divine kings to parliamentary. Second generation, socioeconomic and cultural, and third generation, collective and solidarist. I don't even know how to say that word. Solidarist rights, where it's like environmental things that belong in a world where, there's boundaries are more complex, because we are interconnected with these others so much. Mm-hmm. But so much of this comes, like, so much of like Magna Carta Magna Carta, the original one, which I was fortunate enough to see at Lincoln Castle, which, it's so amazing, this huge castle and this giant thing, and it's protecting this little piece of paper, like, but it goes to show like how much we protect these things. It's like, that was the first time that a group of people, I mean, it was originally the barons, stood up against a king and said, we got to do a deal, because otherwise nothing's going to work out. And the king was like, yeah, fair enough. And so all of a sudden the king was put in a position where he was, he had to work with the people as well. So all of a sudden everyone was under this law, and laws are often based on things like the Bible and the Ten Commandments. And so you get some of that, and some of these things start to mesh together. And like how the French Revolution, like where the whole left and right thing comes from, is how there was the court that was dealing with Louis the 16th, who was doomed anyway to the guillotine. But it was like one side of the court, the right-hand side, was in defense of the king, the left-hand side was in defense of Parliament. And so that's where that kind of starts from. And then you have these debates back and forth, and so it just kind of moves forward. And so rights have kind of evolved from there until one of the neat things was being in in Temple Church, which everyone actually would recognize from the Da Vinci Code, where they come running in and they have like a showdown there or something. But they have in there, they show Magna Carta, Charter of the Forest, and then they show underneath it Declaration of Human Rights, the American Constitution, and our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms would be there too. It's like these things kind of slowly influence their way down to what we have now. And they mentioned that in the Canadian Encyclopedia.
Well, let's talk about the separation of church and state. I think a lot of people are familiar with that term, right? The separation of church and state. But I think a lot of people get that wrong, though, including myself. Like, before I was a Christian, like I basically became a Christian pretty late. I became a Christian at 33.
Oh wow! I was the other way around. I was raised Catholic.
Like my previous exposure to God before that was I was kind of drip fed. I had an aunt that would take me to church every once in a while, and I would have like grandparents that would take me to church every once in a while. But and that was it. So I kind of grew up more or less an agnostic, like not really committed to any one thing, but here's where, where people get the idea of church and state wrong, is that they're like, well, let's get church out of government. Let's get church out of government. But really, the whole separation of church and state was because government was in on church too much. Right. That was more of the problem, is that government was kind of enforcing their will on the churches. So the whole idea of church and state was actually, it was the other way around, where the churches were trying to get more independence from the government, because the governments were actually kind of imposing their will on the churches. That's kind of an important thing to realize as well.
Yeah. And just like today, I came across some news articles, and it's been kind of circulating around. I saw something on the news over the weekend, and I want to talk about human rights. And it's a very important topic that it affects millions of people. And as we age, we can develop more disabilities, as I always say. And it is true, because you can get macular degeneration, you can get other sight impairment, blindness, you can become deaf over time, or you're born that way. As myself, I was born with a visual impairment from birth, and no fault of my own, right? And I wasn't born deaf. I've got really good hearing for now, until some loud truck comes by. But yeah. Anyway, there was an article that was actually on Global News over the weekend, and the provincial government, which I didn't know, but provincial government in BC had been giving $1.1 million as a pilot project over to the Canadian National Institute for the Blind and deaf recipients, to help them motivate, or to, well, not motivate, sorry, wrong word, to help them navigate throughout society in our world, our world where they can now be included in society and just like everybody else, not excluded, with interpreters. Now, the interpreters are the ones who are given the money from the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, from the BC government. But it was a 3-year pilot project. It started in 2022. I guess maybe it was reintroduced then. I'm not sure. But it's coming to an end of March of 2025. And the CNIB is pleading with the BC government to keep that going. Now, what I've been reading is one of the articles was that the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction has basically said that their staff is reviewing the situation, and they commend all the great work that the CNIB is doing for Canadians with disabilities who have sight impairment, low vision, or they're blind or deaf, or blind and deaf across Canada. There's over 1 million recipients affected, and as we age, that number is becoming greater and greater. There's another story in Advocacy in British Columbia that there was a young lady who also has the same situation happening. She wants to be independent. She doesn't know the world without having an interpreter, and it's so important to her so that she can maintain her independence. Without that, she's not able to enjoy life to the standards that many Canadians take for granted that are not disabled. And to me, again, is it God or is it government on that? Government has a play in helping sustain a person's well-being. They're supposed to be there to take care of their citizens, and when they're not, it's a slap in the face to the CNIB, because they're there to try to help people. As I know, I am a registered recipient of the CNIB of Canada, and to me, it's a slap in my face knowing that the government is actually going to pull away funding for them. I mean, they're there to help people, and they've done a lot for me since I was a child, and I am very grateful. And so, a message to the government: please work with the CNIB so that you can actually provide more help to Canadians who need that support going forward. It's so imperative. I mean, don't pull a pilot project if it's working for people, which it is. I mean, that's like taking a life support away from them. Is basically
and like it starts to go into, like I was talking about before, with like where there's this like job focus, like, well, if they got employed, then they'd have the money, and it's like, guys, when people have the rug pulled from underneath them, it doesn't cause them to like buckle down and all this stuff. It just grinds. It just makes it so things are harder. Like, this is the thing that one of my favorite clips that I caught of Scott Santon's talking about a thing was with the American expanded child tax credit, and everyone thought, oh, that's going to make people stop working, and so they didn't see that at all. And when the actual reduction in employment happened, when the thing was pulled, because all of a sudden parents are like, oh my gosh, okay, one of us has to stay home because we don't have the money for childcare. So, and then there was a UK lady who said the exact same thing from the other way around, where costs were rising because of the gas situation, and she's like, at the rate things are going, one of us is going to have to stay home because we can't afford to go to work. So it's like it's like there's a point made by the late gov't, who was a basic income proponent and a billionaire. He was actually he owned like a bunch of supermarkets in Germany, and he's like, you need the money to start, like the money makes you go, right, show us what you can do. It's like it gets that thing started, so then you can get the job that then gets you the thing that, and then it starts to roll. But you need that ignition first, otherwise, it's like bootstraps, the bootstraps thing, which of course was based on a joke, because bootstraps can't actually be used to pull anything up. You need boots first.
Well, that's why the incomes for persons with disabilities in BC and every single province in our beautiful country of Canada, the rates need to be no less than poverty level. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about that part, because as a person with disabilities, and many will develop them over life, or you're born with them, no fault of our own. But those expenses are even greater than the the standard, just the basic levels. But if we can get up to that level, and I'll get Jeff to, you can talk more on this one, is we need to get to that level, right? Right now, those levels are way, way, way down below. They're at like 1980s, 1990s buying power right now. Like, it's terrible.
I'm going to pull it back and start with every human being is born equal to every other human being. Everybody that's born into a family is born into a community. And every community of human beings, the inherent need is to look out for one another, to offer what you can, and everybody make sure that everybody has what they need. That's what community are about in society. And I think that we're inherently, as human beings, born into the situation where we all want to flourish. We all want to make sure that we're seen, we live a positive life, we interact, we communicate, whatever. And we all want to make sure that our brothers and sisters and cousins and their boyfriends and girlfriends all have food and shelter and the basic needs so that they can participate in community. And what I have, I can barter with you, and what you have, you can barter with me, and it becomes this beautiful self-supporting planet in itself. This community in itself is its own little system. That's what we've been missing, I believe, when you live in a colonial-based government structured top-down control. You give us all your money and we'll tell you how we're going to spend it, and we'll tell you what's best for you, and we're going to leave those out which don't contribute, and we're going to put those people that to have to rely on one another instead of us, but we'll still take your money. That's where we're in this world right now, in this country, in this province, in every single province. I believe we all want to see each other be happy and succeed and live a life as fully and as wonderfully as we can, no matter what your ability is, no matter what your differently abled issues are. We all want to make sure that everybody has a loving and light-filled life, whether or not you're religious or not. And I look at the God versus government, and the both premises are based on human failures. The failure to actually capture the essence of what God means. The failures to actually capture the essence of governing people for the betterment of the people, and not for the betterment
of the people for the people.
Exactly. Jeff, we have a comment from chat. Inga is wondering if it's possible for you to turn up your volume a little bit. Is it?
Is my volume down?
It's a little bit. I can hear you fine, but it's a little bit quieter than the rest of us, though.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
If it's possible to turn it up a bit.
Yeah, I just did that. That's perfect.
Okay.
To add on to what you mentioned, Jeff, I remember when I was just a little child, looking back at our little tight little neighborhood that we had. My mom brought me and my brother up as a single mother. My father left when I was a child. He was asked to leave, and so my mom brought us up. Things were tight. Things were really, really tough. She did the best she could. She used to always use the phrase, I would take my shirt off and give it to the next door neighbor if I had to. And our neighbors would put on a barbecue. We'd go over and have some good meals. My mom couldn't do a lot because she was a single mother. She was struggling, and she did the best she could. But in return, what she did was she loved canning. She canned vegetables and fruit and everything, and she'd freeze things and then bring them out, and she'd hand them out to the neighbors in exchange of saying thank you. And so everybody got to share and have rather than have not. So we all got to share in a community based and gave each other the love and just the warmth welcome, and that community spirit feeling was there. And over time, I don't know, like society has changed, but again, is government has created that pyramid, right? They've created that pyramid down like you described, and I think we as society we need to somehow get back into that same mode where we can take control somehow.
Well, I think there's been an erosion. This is my own opinion. I think in the past, government used to respect more of what the standards of God were, or the standards of what's in the Bible. Like, I wanted to throw out a couple of Bible verses, and again, it's not so I can hit people over the head with a Bible, but I just wanted to, from an intellect point of view, just to show people like the power and the wisdom that's inside of the Bible's pages. Like, for example, if you look at, because everybody knows my story that I have the clawback, my pension's clawed back, right? It's been clawed back for 12 years almost now, and it's clawed back as unearned income. But if you look at a couple verses here, I'm just going to read a couple. I'll starting at actually there's a few. Let's start at Proverbs 31, verse 8 to 9. Open your mouth for the mute. Open your mouth for the mute. For the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth. Judge righteously. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. That's Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. And then there's Isaiah 1, verse 17. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Correct oppression. Bring justice to the fatherless. Plead the widow's cause. And again, I'm a widower, so here it's telling us, and it should be telling government as well, to plead the widows or widower's cause, not to claw back and steal from widows and widowers, right? The last one I'll say is from Psalm 82, verse 3. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. So there you go. I mean, that's the wisdom of the Bible, and it's telling all of us, including government, to raise up to a higher level, like a higher standard. Yeah. Raise yourself up to like God's standard of what is right, what is just, what is truth. Like, is it a righteous, just thing to claw money, to steal money away from a widow or a widower? Probably not. Probably not, right?
Like, one of the first things that happens in the Bible is God didn't exactly just leave the Jews to it when they wandered in the desert. Like, the first thing they had, like, there was pheasant wandering into tents, there was manna from heaven, there was rocks that they would hit that would gush water, and their clothes didn't wear down over the entire trip all the way to It's like God went, no, like he's all about abundance and grace, and like that's what he teaches unconditionally.
And can I add on top of that?
Sure.
Based on the other saying about what you do to the least of us, about you do to me,
right?
You know what I mean? So that's a thing, and he does it's stated in such a way that, please don't confuse justice with legal things. It means fairness.
Fairness,
what is right. And he does this not for control, but he does this so you yourself can feel your soul, everything about you feels positive and good, and your life is based in a state of love and positivity and peace and joy and celebration. Where you have others that choose to have control, the government's control, and give money to the few and the greedy and that kind of stuff. Their lives are based on a lower energy of greed and fear, and I will never have enough, so I need to get more, and this, you know what I mean? I need to keep what I have, and I don't want to share anything because I'm going to be poor one day, or someone might have more than me, and then my pride is hurt. So it's like we're told to help each other. We're not commanded. We're invited to help each other, support each other, look out for the least among us, make sure that things are just and loving, right, so that we may flourish, every single one of us, and not just Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or God knows who, or the government or whatever. And the other thing, quick thing, you and I, we live in a reality.
Yeah.
And that reality is completely different than the reality the government lives in.
Yeah. In a bubble, the bubble world.
You're dealing with you're dealing with trying to communicate with someone who doesn't understand your reality. And the reality of white people, it's completely different than the reality of non-white people. And the reality of immigrants coming to the country now is different than the reality of us white immigrants that came into the country 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just, so we're dealing with these different realities, and we have to try to be able to communicate the best we can, so we can all understand that it comes down to community and humanity and helping ourselves, helping each other, helping a stranger for no reason, for nothing in return, for no expectations other than we are one.
Yeah.
There's something I wanted to go off of what Jeff said before and what Brent, you said off of that as well. I wouldn't do a video without a guy standing quote somewhere. But it's also Marilyn Waring, who wrote was a New Zealand parliamentarian and author, who wrote a book called Counting for Nothing, which is that, as Guy said, the most valuable form of work in where he comes from, the United Kingdom, and probably in Canada too, is a kind of work that gets a value of 0, and that work is the work of care. That it is $1 trillion of work that is put in, and like this is what I wrote about in my my little Christmas thing about basic income, which is like, in order for Christmas to happen, there is so much unpaid work that goes into that.
Yeah.
Like, you think about everything, like Brent, you were talking about, like making food for the neighbor and all this stuff.
Yep.
This is our natural. This is like the most powerful thing. This is like where everything else comes from. As I'm a musician, it's like what you see me doing on stage comes from hours and hours before. Adam Smith was talking about, the butcher, the baker, the brewer, and as one person said, it's like, but wait a minute, who was taking care of Adam Smith when he was doing all that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he lived with his mom his whole life. Oh, ta-da! There's so much work that is there to make it so that the employment work happens. Yeah. And so it's like freeing people up gives them the ability. This is it's beautiful. The beginning of this book that Guy wrote recently, The Politics of Time, where he shows how now the ancient Greeks weren't a perfect society, but as they understood, life has there's the full person. There is labor, but that was the thing you didn't want to do. In fact, Aristotle said, "Don't tie yourself to labor." What do we do? Go full blast the other way. But work was like work in the family, work in the community, working in the commons. Then there was ergia, which was actual like taking time off. But that was actually incredibly important, because it's from that time off that you're able to make those distinctions for when you are working. And then there's scholae, which was like education, where we get scholastic from. All these different things are all like the rounding of the full person. As opposed to just this thing of like seeing putting jobs on a pedestal and saying that, and having this, like, people talking today about how 40 hours a week, that's all you do. It's like, what are we doing? In fact, just recently, just today, the BC Labor Minister is reviewing the rights of Uber drivers, because they only get compensated with that app, because they're in the precariat. They only get compensated while they're driving. But as the guy said, it's like, it's not like a coffee shop employee is standing there and or suddenly pops into the store just because a customer shows up. It's like, So anyway, yeah.
I wanted to
rambled off there, but
and I wanted to get back to the idea that even Jesus himself understood the separation of God and government, because if you look at Mark 12, Jesus says, render to Caesar the things of Caesar's, render to Caesar the things of Caesar's. Like, are we, they ask Jesus, are we supposed to pay taxes to Caesar? And so, Jesus answers and says, yes, render to Caesar the things of Caesar, and to God the things of God. So even Jesus himself understood there was a distinction there, right? You pay what the government deserves, and then you pay respect or honor to God. Those two things are separate, right? There's also Romans 13, where it talks about let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. So again, this idea that God is the one that actually appoints the authorities. Like there's another verse that says that God is the one that raises up kings and deposes kings, right? So there's the understanding that yes, governments have power, but it's actually God that raises up that power, right? So there's that understanding there. And I wanted to make that kind of point.
I remember way back in school where we'd have our assemblies, and we would sit around in a circle in our little home rooms, and even back in elementary, they have our little home rooms, and they would actually, before our lunch, we'd all sit down and have our lunch, and our teacher would actually get us together as a class, as a small community, and actually do the prayer. And I thought, wow, like this was something back in school, like, and I always remember that. And thank Jesus for for everything that we have, like, and I don't know, like how society's changed over time. When I remember when I was in high school, we talked about that, and they're like, wow, that's good. That's really good that your teacher actually did that. I said, well, I had a couple of teachers who did that, because they were very religious, but they wanted to make sure that all the students were comfortable and participating, and we're all like, and they're like, share alike, like, and that's what it was always embedded into us of sharing in a community. And of course, when you're a child, you don't really realize what's going on in the real world when you become adult. And then they said that it's gonna be scary out there. It's gonna be scary, but you know what? It's only as scary as you want to make it. That's what one of my history teacher told me. It's only as scary as you want to make it, Brent. You're gonna learn things in life, and you're gonna look back and say, I remember that. I remember what I was taught. I said, and they're like, what were you taught, Brent? I go, respect, dignity, and just being that self, just being who I am as me. And they're like, you just be you and respect others and do the best you can in life, and do unto others as you want done unto you.
That's the golden rule, right?
Yeah.
Add on to that, it's like, if we just step back for a moment, and like the four of us or whoever's watching online, is anybody your enemy? If you come across anybody in this world, is anybody your enemy? Do you want things to be awful for anybody in this world? Do you wish ill things? Do you wish someone to have less than you? Do you wish someone to have more than you? Or do you all wish us to be successful, happy, joyous, positive, and curious, and helping one another, and thankful for what we have in this life? The one thing I come back to is, we in Canada, we live in a country where we have collective wealth. We have the collective wealth of this country, the collective resources of this country. Why are we allowing it to be held by the few at the cost of the many? Why are we allowing our resources to be exploited by the few to gain, while the rest of us suffer? I've never understood that.
Yeah.
Does that make me a communist, or does that make me human?
I've always
Yeah,
wondered the same thing, Jeff, on that. And to me, it makes no sense at all. Where why not let everybody prosper in life, like enjoy,
Everybody has, yeah.
and give
Everybody has this.
everybody like a level to actually prosper and put back into the community, and so that everybody will benefit, everybody will enjoy life. I mean, life's too short to not.
I just wanted to pipe in that we have a comment from Inga in chat, and she says that's a loaded question, and she's referring to when you said, "Does anybody want to have an enemy?" And she says, "I am thankful. Don't get me wrong," but she says, "Yes, I have an enemy," and maybe there are a few people out there that do have enemies. So that's a fair comment.
I understand what she's saying.
And
Because
people
we
get
all can
lock the door.
we can all accrue enemies.
Yeah.
We can all accrue enemies in our lifetime based on misunderstandings, based on ego, based on miscommunications, based on greed and all the lower energy evils. I understand that. But if I came across a stranger, let me put this way. Have you ever met a stranger who's an enemy?
No.
Nope.
Yeah.
Then maybe that's a better way. I've never met a stranger, a fellow human being, no matter how they looked, no matter how they were able to walk, not walk, how they were physically made. I've never came across a stranger who I considered my enemy.
I came across a stranger this morning who out of the blue said, "Hey, I recognize you." I'm like, I've never met you in my life. They're like, "No, you do a podcast. Your name is Brent, right?"
Nice.
I said, yeah. They're like, "Well,
You're
hey,
famous, Brent.
I'm like, "Well," I said, "I hope you like the podcast." They're like, "Yeah, it's very interesting, right?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, we go kind of off the deep end sometimes," but they're like, "That's okay because you need to hold the politicians account." They're like, "Everybody is equal." I'm like, bingo! I go, yeah.
One of the things I wanted to mention, Brent, and maybe this is going to seem like a minor point, but for me it's not, is like, I think, you know that I'm a big Spider-Man fan. Like I've said on the podcast a few times that I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and Spider-Man. There's Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben dies. He gets shot and he dies, but before he dies, he tells Peter Parker, Spider-Man. He tells Peter Parker, "With great power comes great responsibility." Now, where do you think that comes from, Brent, and everybody else? It doesn't come from Stan Lee. Stan Lee didn't come up with that. The idea of great power comes great responsibility. That again comes from God, or it comes from the Bible. I'll pull the verse from the Bible. It's Luke 12, verse 48, and it says, "For everyone who has been given much," so for everyone that's been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been given or entrusted with much, much more will be asked. So again, here's this idea of like government having power, but because they have the power, they're entrusted with all this power. There's a lot of things that are required of them, right? They're required to use that power properly, and that's again where that Spider-Man comes from, is from that verse, right?
And I just wonder how many things are kind of like they're global understandings that we brought together. Like it's like all these different cultures, especially as we become more, a smaller world. All these cultures start clashing into each other. Back when I was an adult student at UVic, I took one course. It's always stuck with me. It was called Linguistics, Language, and Thought, and it was about how Russia has like two different words for blue, or Eskimo. Sorry, that's a terrible word. Inuit have like so many different words for the word snow, because of course there's there's falling snow, there's packed snow, there's and it's like. I just always wonder if like a religion is almost in the same thing, where we have these different, like there's like Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and it's the same. I'm gonna go off on a real tangent, or real maybe I'm completely wrong and horrible, but it's almost like it's the same God coming to people through different stories or different ways of talking about it, because that's that people, and they're best approached, or they understood spirituality through their perspective from the kind of people that they are.
Right.
And so that's how they came to their definition of God, like for First Nations person with the Great Spirits and so forth. But they do have one Great Spirit. It's kind of interesting how, like, when I was working on some Native stories from a curator, like I did the show Ollie and Emma, and it's like I did some reading of was like folk tales, or that's probably the wrong word for it, from Coast Salish or Coast Salish folktales, and it's like they also had a flood story, the same way that we have the Noah's Ark story.
Okay.
It's like, so these very human kind of like, yeah, we have something like that, but we do it this way. It's almost like cooking, It's like, oh yeah, we throw in turmeric, like it's like,
oh wow,
cool. Like,
I completely believe that the essence of every religion in this world is good.
Yeah.
The essence is be good to others, be good to yourself, be good to God.
Yeah.
So
one thing I learned in life so far, you guys, is learning from others on so many different basic aspects of different directions of different ideas, and it's like coming together and collaboratively putting the good into everything. And just one thing I was taught in college from an instructor was believe in yourself, Brent, and others will echo that. They echo that. They believe in themselves. But if you collaboratively come together with different ideas and techniques and be on the same page, but she said, unfortunately, not everybody's on the same page. But if you could try to have different angles of getting to that same page, of different perspectives, all of society will benefit. We all benefit by learning from each other. But unfortunately, when you have lots, and I'm glad that we talked about that, like when you mentioned, Tom, like we have lots. And that was one thing that always stuck in my mind too, was someone could have lots, another person can have not enough. But the ones who have not enough really appreciate more than the ones who have a lot, because the ones who have a lot, really, it actually doesn't really benefit them. It's like Paul Doroshenko said to us one day when we had him on the show, I could give you $100 right now. Okay, you're really gonna utilize that money. If somebody gave me $100 right now, I wouldn't really notice it as much. Like, so it's like have and have nots. It's like balancing it out, though, is that making sure that people who don't have enough, bring them up to having that as a constant level, so that now they can actually go into the communities and support. Doesn't matter if it's just small businesses, but I mean, just in general, being able to buy local if they want, and just enjoy life. You want to go out and, I don't know, buy an ice cream cone. You want to go and buy a cup of coffee at your local shop, and just enjoy it, rather than worrying of saying, well, the government's not giving us an increase. They can go a year, skip a year, go a year, skip a year. Well, I mean, is that how government wants to treat society in general? Like have and have nots? I think that narrative has to change. And
I wanted to throw in a quick thing. I think Jeff's going to say something too, but there's this one quote. I'm a huge fan of Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
And there's this one quote I always wanted to use, but I could never find the original version, so I could never use it. But I'll use it here. What the heck? It's from Dave Gahan, and he after some of the he had some real problems with heroin and stuff, and he actually died and then was brought back to life, and it was really crazy. So he was using these, like Martin Gore said, he's like, Dave was using his interviews as therapy sessions, but Dave was talking to one guy, and he said, you get to a point with wealth as a rock star where it's like you get to a point with your millions where there's nothing you can really buy anymore. Because it's like, you kind of, as far as a private citizen, I'm not going to buy, I probably can't buy a military aircraft, like there's only so much you can really do. There's only so much, you're only going to have one meal at a time. You're only going to drive one car at a time. You're only going to live in one house at a time. It gets to a point where it's just, this is silly. Or you have like Warren Buffett, who said, the only reason I do this is because it's a game and I like to win. So it's like, so it's like, it feels like, okay, let's make, like, I like that joke where it says, if you get to 999 million you win capitalism, and we make a statue of you and put it in a dog park named after you. You know? And then make sure that everybody's, above poverty.
Yeah. Brent, let me just
nobody can earn $1 billion.
Let me add on yours, Brent. If we give money to people that are living in poverty to bring them up out of poverty, how can we get to that place, that shift in mentality when we expect nothing up from them?
Yeah.
Yes.
I expect nothing from you but for you to enjoy your life.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
it doesn't have to be
difference.
about jobs and
there's no need to expect something from you. These people are living in oppression and poverty. We have enough. Oh my God, we so have enough in this country.
Right.
Let's give them money so they're up and out of poverty and expect nothing back.
Jeff, I see it so much. So many times I see on social media, all across platforms, and people are just living in such abject poverty, below, just unacceptable. I mean, homeless person. There was a young lady who had a home. She lost her home. She pleaded for help. The government in Ontario just basically didn't help her. I guess she applied to help, and they just said live within your means. You're obviously over budgeting yourself, and she lost her home, and she was asking for help. She didn't get help, so now she's homeless, and now she can't get proper housing because now some of the landlords are now saying, well, yeah, but you don't have your shelter portion now, so how are you going to pay your rent? Well, you know what? Why don't you just take care of the person in the first place, bring them up to a level, so now they're not in that situation. So what they're doing is that they're suppressing them down further, and it's in so many cases. I look back at what was that lady's name? Her something Bunny, vegan Bunny, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. And it's so tragic because the same thing. Like, it didn't have to be that way. I mean, her story and so many others that are just kept in a abject poverty, and then they fight the system, and the system is actually fighting them to keep them down. I think we need to now get that narrative out of the way. And governments, like, if you're watching this, like, you just need to change the channel on that. Like look at people's well-being. Like, do we have to keep them in abject poverty, like legislative poverty? No.
And earlier, Brent, you were talking about kind of the balance of power, right? How we have to get back to that balance of power. I just wanted to, my final comment will be 2 more verses, and it's all going to tie together this whole podcast about the balance of power between God and government. And so these are the last 2 verses I'll say. And it's the wisdom of the Bible, and so it's 1 Peter 2, verses 13 to 16. It says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority. So again, it's talking about government, to every human authority, whether to the emperor as supreme authority, or to governors, or who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that you do that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slave. So you can see that balance of respecting government, but also respecting the power that God has over everything. And the last thing the last verse I'll say, and then that'll be my mic drop, is it's Romans 12 verse 19. It says, beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So at the end of the day, God gets the final say. So if there's anybody out there that's screwing people over and purposely oppressing people down, small-minded governments that are purposely keeping us down, God says, vengeance is mine. You better watch out. So again, that's why governments need to respect the higher order of what's out there, not just pink unicorn. What is truth? What is what is human rights, we'll just pink unicorn it, but actually have that higher standard, or else you'll face the wrath of God. It's pretty serious. Like, it's serious stuff.
There was an add-on I just want to quickly add on to that, Neil. As we all know, that there's incoming possible tariffs from the President of the United States of America, from Donald Trump. Tariffs now.
Oh, tariffs!
Tariffs. I mean.
Oh, I was so confused there for a minute.
But I'm pumped.
But I mean, with the hefty tariffs, and it's going to cause a lot of huge economic downturns in our society, in our economy. Now, one thing I've learned just recently, which I didn't know, but between the provinces, there has been taxes put on each tax of importing stuff from each province into each province. Now, again, that hurts society. Now, that's government control policies. Now, you take away those barriers. Now, it actually freely helps every Canadian. It's a whole trickle-down effect. I learned this in economics in college. I mean, my gosh, way back, I learned so many different little things. And when I heard that, like that's nonsense. Like, you don't need all these taxes between provinces, like have and have nots. Like, okay, well, you want our, I don't know, I'll just randomly throw something out there. You want our loaf of bread from Alberta over to Saskatchewan because we make good bread. Well, we're going to tax you on that. Or we're going to send your liquor over from Alberta over to BC. I mean, we're going to tax you on that, or vice versa. It's like throwing hand grenades at each other. And it's like people with disabilities. It's like saying, well, you're in this province, but you can't go to that province because you need to now apply to see if you're disabled in that province. Do we have to do that as Canadian citizens? Why not freely be able to move across the whole country, same as our goods and services? And that's the problem, is that Canada's so reliant on the U.S. Like, we'll grow stuff down here, or we'll produce get our lumber, we'll ship it down the U.S. They'll do the process of it. They'll ship it back up to us. They'll charge us a hefty price. So why can't we just do that across the country? I mean, I think so many things can change when it comes to that. Again, I mean, is it government or is it God? God would want freedom of movement. God said, okay, you're born here. You should be able to freely move, go where you want. You shouldn't have to prove yourself to see if you're living in Ontario, are you disabled, and you want to move to BC. Well, BC says, no, you gotta live here for 3 months to be a resident. I mean, you're a Canadian citizen, but be a resident, and then apply to see if you're disabled in BC. Oh, you're gonna have to wait. You have to get a doctor. Well, that's another whole ball game in itself. But anyway, I think that a lot of things can change so easily. But first of all, what we need to do is get people up to a standard means of living, and that, like, effective immediately. That has to end. And because this year, I'm looking at the BC budget. It hasn't come out, but I think with these tariffs that are going to come up, I think the BC government is going to have an excuse. I have the writing on the wall.
Word, Brent, excuse. Now we're dealing with new bullshit. There's new bullshit, new reason to keep us oppressed. And that's all it is bullshit.
Exactly. And I think they're just going to run with that narrative. Oh, economic uncertainty. There's more to do. But then they're going to say, well, we raised the rates 5 times. And the government, that's got to end too. Like, that's all, to me, that's all smoke and mirrors kind of. That's all like propaganda. And that's to the investors saying, we're taking care of them. No, you're not. You're not. I mean, so you need to bring people up to a standard of living. Don't wait on the federal government. Stay in your own lane. Take care of your own residents within your own province. If the feds do that, great. But we know after almost 5 years now. So whatever. That's all. Whatever is happening there in feds. But provinces, take care of your own residents. Bring us up to a standard so we can now take care of each other. Take care of ourselves. Take care of local businesses. I mean, let's prosper. Let's prosper. I mean, take away all the barriers.
Without expectations from
Exactly. I mean,
like mobility rights are actually part of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which brings in I want to do further reading. This is a really good book. I couldn't get into it as far as I wanted to by Andrew Petter. He was a former NDP MLA, and he was actually not against the charter, but he saw problems with the charter, and you see them playing out because like the charter and many of these things is almost like taking from Neil what you say about God. It's almost like when you write something like the rights, like the beginning of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, it's like, whereas the recognition of the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. It's like that is like, it's like you can feel it intuitively. And where does that intuition come from? Like it's
exactly,
like that's it right there. It's like him going, "You should write that, by the way." And but the problem is freaking lawyers. No, the problem is, as Petter explains, someone can go, well, this is this thing with this right, and that's that right, and then all of a sudden the rights start they're so broadly done that it can get turned around all kinds of different ways. So
I want to hear
it's
more
like
about
this
that book.
evolving thing, if you're a wealthy person, it's like, where do you want to live? Don't say Mars, because you have to live here amongst everyone. It's like you've already like.
I was going to say Jupiter.
You put a security system in your home. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why don't I make it so I don't even need a security system? Why don't I make it so when me and my wife go for a walk downtown, everyone's doing great, and it's a great town to live in, because we're all doing great. Like you're better off when it's like, I'll finish with a line by Thomas More, which it famously made famous with basic income, but. He said, surely it's be better of a king of wealthy men than a king of beggars. Like, where do you want to live?
So, can I finish off by plugging our Ottawa rally?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I'm working on that. Brent, Sonia, and I are going to be flying to Ottawa next Tuesday, which is February the 4th. We're working with the House of Commons, the Parliament's police force, and everything. We're setting up a table and tent, and our banners are coming with us. We're giving out postcards to the office of the Prime Minister. And thank God I wrote it that way, because I could foresee the future and not be any specific person. And those postcards are free to come and get and sign and put in the mailbox with no postage. We're calling for the government to stop all this crazy games and bring people 1.5 million, not 20,000, not 800,000, 1.5 million. Every single person that's living below the poverty level across this country, up and out of poverty, no less than equal to the official poverty level of Canada. So if you're in Ottawa, February 5th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., come down and see us. We'll be wearing our layers and winter coats, which we have to dust out of our because we never wear them out here on the West Coast. So minus 17 and minus 19, Brent, I bet you better put some good layers on.
Oh yeah. We haven't had any snow out here at all, not even one little snowflake yet. Yes. And so we get there, we'll see winter wonderland, and I'll be doing a Breaking with Brent segment out there too. It'd be quite interesting.
And we're doing this because we were supposed to be there for House of Commons petitions.
Yes.
So that's why we're still doing it. Our premise is, where's the government? Where's the government? We're still suffering in poverty. So it's mostly a press thing. It's mostly a come and greet us on the Parliament Hill. We're here. Where are you, government?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, how convenient that the federal government decided to probe the government, and knowing that there's a lot of outstanding issues that need to get resolved within Parliament.
Not just us, like issues that every single Canadian faces right now.
Yeah.
And play these silly little games. Come on.
Exactly.
And talking about church, how convenient. Remember that church chat? How convenient.
Lady.
So definitely, if you're out in Ottawa, anyone, and you would like to come to join us and show support of your fellow Canadians living with disabilities as an ally, please come out to Ottawa on February the 5th, and we'll be there. Looking forward to seeing you and stand in solidarity with us, and definitely bundle up, because I know I will be in layers. I'll be like, wow, this is cold. But it's a different kind of cold. It's a dry cold from what we're used to out here. I heard in the long range forecast when we get back, Jeff, there might be a chance of some snow.
Yeah.
Four-letter words, no.
Yeah.
I know.
So you're saying there's a chance.
There's still that chance. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And so I want people just to realize that living with disabilities, it can be something that we can work with together, like getting through the barriers of financial freedom. I mean, anyone can actually become disabled in their life. I mean, just a snap of your finger, you will become disabled. At any point in time in your life, either born or as you get older, you're going to get a disability of some sort. Are you going to be needing to be on financial support? Maybe, maybe not. You might luck out. But if you are, you need to have your income up to a financial level where you're able to have a satisfying life, where you're not struggling in legislative poverty, under government imposed poverty. That, I mean, to me, that doesn't make any sense of having a ministry called poverty reduction. I mean, they're not reducing poverty at all. They're actually escalating poverty. When you skip a year, go a year, skip a year. It actually suppresses people into more poverty. My motto is get people out of poverty, like Jeff and Tom and Neil and all of us. We want to see people happy. We don't want to see people living under government imposed poverty. It doesn't have to be that way in Canada. I want to see people prosper.
There's too many unicorns, Brent. Too many unicorns.
There's way too many unicorns. And I mean, all the infighting going on, it's like government loves to peg disabled against disabled, have-nots. I mean, was it in 2023, Jeff? What was it, that 125 increase? Oh, some got it, some didn't. I mean, yes. Sonia brought that to my attention yesterday. She said she's still livid about that. Why did some get it and some don't? I said, because the government loves to peg disabled against disabled. And she goes, why didn't we get an increase in 2024? I go, again, that was a government choice. And now this year they're going to say, oh, well, we can't do it because of economic downturn. No, please don't do that, government. Please don't do that. My landlord even asked me again, just the other day, a little reminder, Brent, has the government responded to your inquiry? I go, what was that? Why didn't they raise the rates in 2024? I always use that on the podcast because it's an outstanding issue. When you're living in legislative poverty and you have to pay market rent and the cost of living going up, the opportunity last year was an indication right there. Forecast, be proactive, forecast for the future. And you could have actually brought the rates up to above that level at that time. How is that supercomputer going on?
Right now, they're all on vacation, Brent. They're all on vacation.
Yes, everybody's on vacation.
Remember that super duper computer? It was supposed to be the state-of-the-art computer. So it's a big bucks. I wonder, that was in 2024. I wonder, maybe it broke down already.
Anyway, we got to punch out there, Brent.
Anyway, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today to PWD Allies podcast. Please like, subscribe, share. Click the like button if you love the content, and it'll take you to a link where you can contribute to the channel.
Throw us a coffee. There's a little heart in the chat right now. You'll see it in the live chat. There's a heart with the $. It's live right now, and then 24 hours later, you'll see that little heart with the $. Underneath the video once it's posted. About 24 hours later, it comes live again. So if you want to donate, then you can as well.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and stay tuned for more exciting other shows coming up. And like in Ottawa, we're going to be there February 5th again. So definitely join us. Thanks.
Cheers.
Take care.